And I'm just gonna, there's 6 people waiting. Why don't we admit them? And then maybe Joy, you can say we're just waiting a few more seconds for a couple more people or something like that.
Sure.
Okay, I'm gonna admit them now.
Welcome, everyone. We are waiting just a couple more minutes for a couple more people to arrive, and then we will start with our 5-part series of 5 impactful ways to fight climate change. You're welcome to come and go for the different topics as you please. It's the same link. And all of these will be recorded so that other people and yourselves can watch them again. So please be aware that they will be recorded. If you have questions during the time, please put them in the chat and I will moderate the questions at the end of each session. Also, these are being put on by the Haverford Township EAC. You can follow the EAC on our Facebook page. Melissa, do you want to give that information?
Sure, the Facebook page is Friends of Haverford EAC. And we also have a YouTube page if you search Haverford EAC.
Okay, let's go ahead and we will begin. Again, if you have questions during the talk, please put them in the chat. This is being recorded, so please be aware. First, we will have Melissa Romano. She is going to talk about the impact of your food choices. Melissa is a member of the Haverford Environmental Advisory Committee and HCAM, as well as a volunteer with Sierra Club and Penn Environment. She drives an electric car and installed solar panels in 2019 through Solarize, which now she volunteers for Solarize Delco, assessing homes, responding to emails, and answering all questions.
Thank you, Joy. Hi, I'm Melissa Romano, and I'm going to discuss the environmental impacts of an animal-based diet and how a plant-based diet can help fight climate change and environmental degradation. The first topic to consider when deciding to eat a more plant-based diet is climate change. Man-made climate change is caused by greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, causing temperatures to rise gradually over time. Animal-related farming and agriculture ranks the second highest category of global greenhouse gas emissions, contributing approximately 20 to 40% of all emission based by sectors. Ranking first would be energy production. Shifting from fossil fuels for energy and transportation to renewable sources could cost the US $45 trillion, whereas eating a plant-based diet could cut the cost in half. While not everyone may have the means to purchase an electric car and solar panels, eating a more plant-based diet is not only better for the environment, but think of all the money you'll actually save from not buying animal meat. We raise 70 billion animals annually for human consumption. The livestock sector alone represents almost half of these emissions, mostly due to cattle and lamb releasing methane in their manure and their digestive process known as enteric fermentation. Methane is a greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide in our air. You can see from this slide, the cattle and lamb have a carbon footprint comparable or just a bit more than a journey in a mid-sized car, whereas the rest of the food are about half as that. The reason why lamb and cattle are higher is because of their size. As cattle are larger animals, each cow has more edible meat than a lamb. Again, here you can see that eating beef is the very top of the chart. Note, cheese and dairy are also the third and the fourth row, and pig and poultry are the 9th and the 10th row. And all the way at the bottom, you can see nuts actually have a negative land use because they store carbon in their trees. You can see the other carbon emission sources for food products are from various things like land use change, farming emissions, Animal feed, processing, transport, retail, packaging, tractors, big rigs, factories, refrigerators, they all use fossil fuels. There's gasoline and oil in the vehicles, electricity derived from burning fossil fuels like coal and natural gas. Common packaging includes styrofoam and plastic, both which are made from fossil fuels. Thus, animal protein creates 10 times as much carbon dioxide than plant proteins. Replacing beef would reduce carbon dioxide. Replacing beef with plants would bring carbon dioxide down from 1,984 pounds to just 73 pounds of carbon dioxide. So just by cutting out beef alone, you can make a huge impact to climate change. Next, contributing to climate change is the loss of carbon stored in forests and soils. Meat and dairy demands are causing deforestation, which means more native land and ecosystems, say like the Amazon rainforest, are being cleared for more animal agriculture use. In fact, 70% of the Amazon forest is cleared for cattle ranches. Sadly, fires are commonly used to clear the forest as well, which in turn is putting more pollution and carbon dioxide in the air, taking away the trees. The Amazon is called the lungs of the earth. It gives us oxygen and it absorbs carbon dioxide. This is a good reason to buy locally free-range grass-fed beef if you want to cut back some of the harmful environmental effects without also giving up a cheeseburger. Also, we're using fossil fuels again, this time to make mineral fertilizers. Ammonia is used as the nitrogen source in fertilizer, requiring the use of natural gas and air for synthetic production. Nitrogen fertilizers release nitrous oxide, and phosphorus component is made of sulfur, coal, and phosphate rock. Again, all manufacturing facilities use electricity, mostly generated from coal or gas, and the end product is packed in plastic and transported across the globe. So these are the 4 contributing factors to climate change for animal agriculture. In Pennsylvania, we're already seeing climate change effects, like rising temperatures, an increase and severity of precipitation, and increasing air pollution. So let's think about this. Animal farming contributes to climate change. Climate change causes flooding, droughts, heat waves, which then all affects plant production for both the animals that we eat, plus us. Thus, we're creating a very vicious cycle here. Another environmental consideration is the Earth's available land and water supply. The picture on the left shows our water breakdown. Water covers 75% of Earth, but only less than 3% of that is actual drinkable fresh water. And of that 3%, 70% is frozen in glaciers, which are melting thanks to climate change again into our seawater, which leaves just 1% of Earth's fresh drinkable water for us to use. Only 30% is accessible through aquifers. Aquifers are underground water supply that takes millions of years to accumulate, and it can't be replenished as much or as fast as we use it. Of that remaining 1% of available fresh water, what's not polluted, agriculture uses 2/3 of it to water crops, which then some are grown specifically to feed the livestock for us to consume. And 22% of that water is used for industries. According to the National Geographic, they reported in the United States, it takes 1,799 gallons of water to produce just 1 single pound of grain-fed beef. So the picture on the right shows our land breakdown. Animal agriculture occupies about 37% of our land. 70% of that is just used for animal pastures. And there's also fields to grow crops to feed the animals and crops to feed us. So let's discuss how much land is used for ground beef. For every 6 pounds of plants that are fed to cows results in just 1 pound of the cow that we would eat, and only half their weight is edible. So it takes 12 pounds of plants to feed 1 cow to produce 1 pound of cow meat. Why are we using 8 times as much land to grow plants and 1,800 gallons of water to feed a cow just to eat a burger rather than just eat the plants and drink the water ourselves? Now let's discuss biodiversity loss. This is the largest factor threatening species with extinction. Back to deforestation. As native plants are cleared for animal agriculture, all the animals and insects that depend on those plants will be forced to relocate or perish. The loss in variety of life can lead to a breakdown of an entire ecosystem. In addition, we're also killing insects. 40% of insect extinctions are caused by pesticides, which are sprayed on the grains. Pesticides are used to improve crop yields easily, but can be toxic and remain in the soil for years. Herbicides are also used to prevent weeds and accounts for 75% usage on crops, mainly corn, soy, wheat, and cotton. Then there are genetically modified crops, GMOs. GMOs are produced to be resistant to herbicides, so we can spray our crops with as much toxic weed killer as possible without killing the crop as well. Currently, 93% of soy and corn are genetically engineered to be able to use more herbicides like Roundup. 70% of soy and corn grown is then fed to livestock for us to be able to consume. In my opinion, this is why I choose to buy organic and non-GMO products. Finally, the last topic for the environmental impact of eating meat are the water and soil changes. Eutrophication means an overload of nutrients, causing dead zones in the water where marine life cannot survive. Common nutrients causing dead zones in lakes and coastal areas are the nitrogen and phosphorus, which are found in the herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, and manure. And all of that is being washed by irrigation systems and heavy rainfall, climate change again, into our water. The Gulf, there is over 400 dead zones around the world. One of the biggest ones is the Gulf of Mexico, which lies right under us in the US and is famous for its dead zone that is 8,776 square miles wide. And we're also losing our topsoil at an alarming rate. It takes nature 1,000 years to generate 3 centimeters of topsoil. An acre of healthy topsoil can contain 2,400 pounds of fungus, 1,500 pounds of bacteria, 900 pounds of earthworms, 900 pounds of arthropod and algae, and 133 pounds of protozoa. But today, we're losing our topsoil again by tilling, irrigation systems, and the heavy rainfall. The average rate of soil erosion on the US cropland is 7 tons per acre per year. Doing so also kills all the microbes and insects that create the healthy topsoil. What's left is an empty bare soil, now more prone to erosion. So we're using too much land, too much water, polluting our land and water, contributing to climate change. Also, we can have a cheeseburger. Meanwhile, third world countries are starving, suffering droughts, heat waves, and food scarcity. Let's talk about something a little more positive now. First, I want to discuss sustainability. Sustainability means meeting the needs of our present generation without compromising the ability for future generations to also meet their needs. Sustainability encompasses the environment, economics, health, and nutrition. We cannot have a secure food supply unless that food supply is sustainable. Without sustainable practices, global environmental degradation increases the risk of irreversible and catastrophic shifts in the earth, causing food insecurity, malnutrition, starvation, migration, and ultimately death. By 2050, consumption of meat is expected to rise by 76%, and dairy products 64%. Do we have 76 and 64% more land and water? No. The animal agriculture industry is not going to tell you not to eat meat. This is a personal choice that you're going to have to make for yourself, your family, and the health of the planet. So how can we do that? Regenerative agriculture. It's a system of farming principles and practices that can sequester more carbon in the soil and lessen our atmosphere. Because there are more plants, therefore more and longer roots. More diverse plants equal more diverse microbes living in that topsoil. Regenerative agriculture can improve watersheds by obtaining better filtration and water retention in the soil. It enhances rather than destroys the ecosystem. And because there is more bioproductivity, it can improve nutrient density and crop yields. And using natural manure rather than that nitrogen-based fertilizer, all while at the same time, it's rebuilding our topsoil, which is being depleted by improper tilling. So by using regenerative agriculture rather than industrial farming practices, we can create a sustainable plant-based food supply that will preserve our land and water for future generations to come. According to the study in the journal Climatic Change in 2014, the average meat eater in the US is responsible for almost twice as much global warming as the average vegetarian, and close to 3 times that of the average vegan. We need to leave fossil fuels in the ground because it's not only the leading cause of climate change, it's also not sustainable. We need to move as rapidly as possible towards renewable energy and electric cars, but we also need to implement regenerative agriculture principles that sequester more carbon and eating a more plant-based diet in order to fight climate change and sustain our environment. There's also many health benefits associated with eating a plant-based diet. It can decrease heart disease, cancer, diabetes, high cholesterol, weight, and inflammation in your body. Please remember, our actions always have an impact, big and little. You don't have to go from eating meat to a vegan diet. Many environmentally savvy people adopted what's called a reducitarian diet, reducing the carbon footprint foods like meat and dairy. Whether you start meatless Mondays or meat only on Monday and vegetarian the rest of the week, you can cut out just lamb and beef. You can switch to a plant-based milk. You can buy organic and local. You can do it all at once or just one step at a time. Whether you eat meat or not, one thing we all need to work on is not wasting our food. In the US, we throw about 103 million pounds of food a year. Globally, about 1/3 of all the food produced is thrown out. Food that sits in landfills release methane as it breaks down. Food also adds weight to our trash pickups. So we can remove the food compost, the food waste from our trash pickups, and that would reduce the amount of money we pay for this trash service. If composting yourself is not for you, there's 3 local options in our area: Mother Compost, My Kitchen Harvest, and Back to Earth Compost. Or you can even bring your waste to Mom's Organic Market. Backyard composting is easy to do if you know how. And if you don't know how and you'd like to learn, we're offering a composting webinar next week, April 21st from 7 to 8 o'clock at night. And you can register on the Parks and Recreation page, just like this webinar. And once you've completed the course, you can purchase a compost bin for just $25. Lastly, we've created a handout to go along with this food webinar. It contains some information like substitutions when cooking, local restaurants with plant-based options, educational resources, and the composting options we've listed above. It is going to be emailed to everybody along with the recording of the webinar in a couple days. And for more articles and information, please again look at our Facebook page or our YouTube page for a more in-depth video. Thanks for joining our first part of our webinar series today. I think we have a couple of minutes if there's any questions before we move on to the next segment.
Great. Do we have any questions for Melissa?
I'll ask a question. This is Jason. So Melissa, I know a lot of times when people kind of have our standard American meat heavy diet, there's a lot of hesitancy or uncertainty about how you would start to make the switch. So I was wondering if you had any advice from your own experience of what are some early steps that people might take to make this transition easier if they want to?
Sure. Well, personally myself, we transitioned away from some meat and dairy products maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I just took one thing at a time. I started with my milk, and we tried a bunch of different plant-based options until we found one that I could get my kids to like. And then after that, we would tackle another thing, yogurt or cheese, or we end up trying a lot of different meat substitutes because some of them can be finicky and, taste a little different texture than meat, but just try one thing at a time, 1 week, 1 day, 1 meal. You don't have to change everything all at once.
And we have another question from Olivia. How and why did you get started learning about this?
About food in general? Well, it kind of was everything. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and before I had kids, I didn't pay too much attention to what was going on in the world. But now that I have kids, I want to make sure this world is going to be here for them when they're older. So I took a deep dive into climate change and I learned everything I could. And that included getting electric cars and solar panels and becoming a member of the Haverford EAC. And I just want to do everything I possibly can so I could tell my kids that I tried.
Great answer. Okay, I don't see any more questions. We can have some more at the very end. The next presentation, will be by Jason Baxter. Jason Baxter is a professor at Drexel University in chemical engineering, who recently taught a class on solutions to global warming. He also has solar panels on his home. Jason.
Okay, thanks, Joy. So yeah, today it's my pleasure to talk a little bit about home energy efficiency. So I think a lot of times when we think about what can we do about global warming, we immediately go to things like solar panels and windmills. And I'm definitely a huge proponent of that. In about 40 minutes, I will be talking about solar panels for your home. But before you even get to that point, it's important to think about the energy that you don't use. So although solar panels and wind turbines can make pretty clean energy compared to fossil fuels, nothing is cleaner than not using that energy in the first place. And you can reduce your home's energy consumption by a bunch of steps that are pretty easy and inexpensive. So that's the purpose of this talk in the next 15 or so minutes. So if we think about what are the different ways that our homes use energy and thereby contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, the pie chart here does a pretty good job of summarizing. So about half of our home's energy use goes to heating and cooling. And then there's also significant fractions that go towards lighting, heating water, and then also electricity for our appliances and our other electronics. So by reducing the amount of energy that we need to put into heating, cooling, and running our electronics and appliances, we can reduce our carbon footprint. And while things like putting solar panels on your house can be pretty daunting and not everyone's house is well suited, or maybe not everyone is ready to make that kind of investment, doing things to improve your home energy efficiency is quite cheap and is frequently fast to do and also has a pretty fast payback time. So these are really good things. I think when people really want to start to improve their lifestyle and reduce their carbon footprint, doing things like changing your diet and improving your home energy efficiency are some really nice ways to start. It also can make your house feel more livable. If it's less drafty, it's more airtight and more energy efficient. So today I'll talk about heating and air conditioning systems, ways to seal the building envelope, thinking about appliances and lighting. And then at the end, we will talk about how do you get help making sense of all this, figuring out how to prioritize, and in some cases, even getting help to pay for it. Okay, so in addition to reducing our carbon footprint by reducing our energy use, we also reduce our electricity bills. So the payback times of retrofitting or weatherization type of jobs around the house are frequently on the order of 1 to 10 years. We've heard a lot recently about infrastructure, and I think it's really important that we think about infrastructure as an investment and not a cost. And when we think about our buildings around the United States, a $270 billion investment would return about $1 trillion in energy savings over the next 10 years. So that's not just our own homes, but also commercial and institutional type of buildings. From personal experience, our own family did a little home energy audit, and replacing light bulbs was a really effective thing for us to do. So when we bought the house, it had an amazing amount of recessed lighting. We have 64 recessed lights in the house, and by switching those from incandescents to LEDs, we were able to save 30% on our electricity bill just by changing out the lights. So there's some pretty basic things that we can all do to make a difference in a hurry. And one way that you can kind of keep track of how you're doing is just to look at your utility bill. So your Pico bill, for example, helps you to track your energy usage on a monthly and yearly basis. So here's an example bill. There is a blue line here, which is at the lowest month of any energy use. So this was in April, which is a pretty nice weather type of month when you're not doing any heating or air conditioning, but you do have some base load for running your appliances, your electronics, hot water, things like this potentially. Okay, so anything above this blue line then tends to be things like heating and air conditioning in the winter or the summer months. Okay, so you can use your bill to help you keep track of how you're doing, see if you've made improvements in reducing your energy consumption after you make some of these changes. Okay, so half of that pie chart at the beginning was on heating and cooling. That's where our biggest potential for impact is. So the picture at the right shows an infrared image of a home, and we can see in these kind of brighter areas where a lot of the heat is being lost. So sometimes, at the corners between different building materials or through windows, for example. Okay, so before you start even going and changing things out, you can just think about your own behaviors at home. So this costs nothing to change, but in the winter, for example, you might choose to not heat your house quite as much, and you could instead wear sweaters or fleeces at home. Or in the summertime, instead of cooling it so cool, maybe you can have a slightly higher set point for your temperature and just place fans in the room that you happen to be in. Fans are very low energy devices. You can also think about doing things like not heating and cooling when you're not home. So the easiest way to do this is probably with either a programmable thermostat or a smart thermostat. So things like Nest or Ecobee smart thermostats cost on the order of $200. But depending on your current habits, you can pretty quickly recover those costs by reducing your energy consumption. Likewise, you can try to seal the building envelope. Okay, so sealing the building envelope and not heating or cooling when you're not home are two ways that you can reduce your energy consumption, because it's wasteful to condition air that then leaks out of the house or does not directly go to making you feel more comfortable. A couple of the ways you might think about doing this are to use insulation or use double pane windows. You can also think about other things you might do around the house, things like using a tankless water heater to reduce the amount of latent water that's just sitting around hot, or using shade trees to block some of the heat from hitting your house in the first place. So some quick things that you can do to think about building envelope and insulation are kind of indicated by the picture on this slide. So we all know that heat rises, and if you are, for example, in the winter heating your house, heat from that second floor can rise up into the attic. Okay, so you're not living in the attic, you don't want the heat up there, you want the heat to stay where you are. So one easy thing that you can do is to make sure that you have a sufficiently thick layer of insulation on the floor of your attic. Another thing that you can do is to make sure that you don't have gaps, okay, so that you have good seals around your windows and doors. And there's some really easy and cheap things you can do for this. So things like caulk, if you have a pretty narrow gap, or spray foam insulation. These are both things you can get at the hardware store for a couple of dollars. Go spend a couple hours and you can significantly reduce gaps. You can also use weather stripping on doors, for example. Double pane windows are much more efficient at eliminating heat transfer than a single pane window, and also using insulation both in your walls and on the floor of the attic to make sure that we are not conditioning air that escapes from the house. Okay, so everything there is just behavioral or very simple changes, but we can also think about the equipment that we use for heating and air conditioning. It's important you want to keep your equipment well maintained. Okay, so just like you do routine maintenance on your car, you should also do this for your home HVAC system. You want to avoid leaky ducts. You should replace your air filters regularly so the pump doesn't have to work so hard. When it's time to change out equipment, you can think about moving to more energy efficient models. You can also think about moving from gas furnaces to a high efficiency electric heat pump. This can help to reduce your carbon footprint. especially if you're using clean electricity. So Peter will talk more about clean electricity in the next talk, but this is also something that's quite easy to switch to. Okay. In terms of other possible heating sources, fuel oil and propane, these are pretty undesirable ways to heat your house. So natural gas is better than those, and going to electric is even better than that. Okay, so we can think about using energy efficient appliances, not just for HVAC systems, but also everything else, our refrigerators and dishwashers and washer dryer for clothing. And if you're looking at appliances, the Energy Star indication is a good way to know, whether that appliance is going to be pretty efficient. So you can go to their website. Pico also does a lot of work to try to help its customers be more energy efficient. Okay, so utility companies have a mandate to try to help their customers to reduce their energy consumption. So they have a lot of useful suggestions on their website. One thing that a lot of people have is a second refrigerator, and a lot of times these are old and not filled very much, and these are really quite large energy hogs. So if you can avoid second refrigerators, especially old ones, that will definitely benefit the environment as well as your electricity bill. Another is using efficient LED lighting. Okay, so I mentioned that this worked really well for our family. LEDs are light emitting diodes. It's just a different way of producing light, but it is about 10 times more efficient than incandescent bulbs and about twice as efficient as compact fluorescents. So you can produce more light with less electricity with LEDs, and the bulbs last longer. So between those two things, they typically give about 10 to 30% return on investment for switching to LED bulbs. Okay, and this is as simple as going to the hardware store, buying some light bulbs and installing them. So it's quite easy. So we've given a bunch of different ideas in terms of insulation, appliances, lighting, and how do you make sense of them all or decide which ones you should do first? There are pretty well organized ways of going through and doing a home energy audit to reduce your carbon footprint. And you can do this either as a DIY kind of project or with a professional. So if you are interested in doing it yourself, but you want a little bit of guidance, this website is from the Department of Energy. And they give some indications of what you should look for as you're going through your house for quick and easy and cheap fixes that could save significant energy and money. You can also do a professional assessment. There's a bunch of different sources for getting these, but one is just through Pico. So the normal price is $49, but through the end of April, they're having a half price deal. So for under $25, you can get a professional to come walk through your house for an hour or two and point out to you what would be the most cost-effective ways that you can improve your energy efficiency, and then you can go out and do those projects, either on your own or with a professional, depending on what they are. There are a number of other ways your utility company can also help. Okay, so if you go to Pico Ways to Save for your home, they talk about doing these energy assessments. They also talk about different opportunities for equipment rebates when you're buying appliances, discounts on LEDs when you're buying lighting, and so forth. So I would encourage you to take a look around the Pico site and see if they have some ideas that would be useful to you. They also have these kinds of tools and calculators where you can compare, for example, how much money would you save if you chose different thermostat settings. So you just put in some basic information about your house size and how you typically control the temperature. And then how much would you save if your set point was 2 degrees different, for example, and a bunch of other things related to water heaters, natural gas, heat pumps, and so forth. There is assistance available if this is something that maybe is difficult for you on current budget. So the Community Action Agency of Delaware County is a great resource, and it is serving people who qualify by various different metrics. So if you are involved in SSI or TANF, or if your family size has maximum income that fits this table on the right, you could qualify for free weatherization. Okay, so they will come in here, they will help you weatherize your home. That will make it both more comfortable and reduce your electricity bills. And they also sometimes have bill paying assistance as well. Okay, so if that's something you're interested in, you can go to this website for CAADC or call their phone number. Okay, so I will stop there and allow some time for questions, and I'll just finish on this website, which I have accidentally covered up some of the links. So let me pause. Sorry about that. And now I will reshare. Okay, so I'll finish here and leave these links up. And I think Joy is also going to put these into the chat for people who are attending live, and we'll just leave a few minutes for questions.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, I did put those in the chat. Does anybody have any questions? You can either type them in the chat, or since we have a fairly small group, you can go ahead and unmute and ask them. Okay, other than LEDs, how can people living in apartments reduce footprints?
Yeah, so I guess what you would do depends on, if you're renting an apartment, or if this is a situation where you own your living space, you can do different things. You can do some pretty basic things like weather stripping, and this could, if you have a door that is going to the outside, you could weather strip to reduce airflow. So if you can, as a general rule, see the outside world from the inside through cracks, these are things that we should try to reduce. Or if you can just use your hand and feel the draft, there might be ways that you can try to seal that space. Some people also recommend lighting a candle or an incense stick and just kind of walking around and putting it in different places and see which way the smoke is wafting. And that gives you some feel for whether there are leaks that you can go ahead and seal. So you may not be in an apartment, if you're renting, it might not be something where you would go out and change the appliances, but you certainly can do things like changing the set points that you use for your temperature. So whether you're buying or renting, you can reduce your energy use. So in the summertime, instead of setting the temperature at 74, maybe you're willing to set it to 78 and use a box fan or something like that. So that's something that we typically do in our house. Or in the winter, maybe instead of heating it quite so much, just heat it to 68 and then wear warmer clothing. So there's a bunch of things like that that you can do that both reduce your energy consumption and also potentially reduce your energy bills.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any other questions? Okay. Our next topic for our webinar is how to buy renewable energy, or a lot of times electricity. And this will be given by Peter Buglinici. Peter is—
Yes, I am here. I
Right.
am.
Peter is a co-chair of Haverford Township EAC. He drives an electric motorcycle and car and has been purchasing renewable wind power for years, successfully navigating the hurdles of the PA open power market. So Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, Joy. Let me see if I can get my shared screen.
For those of you just joining us, if you have questions during the session, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. We are recording this for so people who are not able to make it can make use of this information. Peter, do you need an assistance?
Yeah, this seems to be a little You're not seeing my presentation yet, are you?
It's coming up, but slowly.
Okay, my apologies. All right, are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, thank you, Joy. So this segment is on buying renewable power. A little review of what you're buying now, what you could be buying, how it factors into what you can do to fight global warming. What are you buying now from PECO, if you are currently buying from PECO, is basically a mix of things, combination of coal and natural gas and nuclear. And if you look at the uh, bar chart on the right, it's actually a very, very small percentage of renewable power. So you have a mix of things, and you're definitely contributing to carbon emissions from that mix. One of the things that people ask about buying renewable power is, well, how could we be sure that it's really renewable? Well, you can have some confidence because the power that goes into the grid and that comes out of the grid is monitored by the PJM interconnect system, basically the transmission system operator for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. And so they track basically the source of every bit of power that is put onto the grid. And you could see, what the typical mix is in the PJM area. So it's a mix of natural gas and nuclear and coal and just a very little bit of other renewables. Okay. And switching to renewable electricity, well, why do it? Because number one, it can have an impact. And it's, as you could see, the grid mix today for a variety of reasons does not have a lot of renewable. And if we all chose to purchase renewable, we could move the generation market. Currently, the state regulations are stuck in a very, very modest renewable goal. I think the goal for solar, for example, is capped at 0.5%. Okay, in contrast to things that you read in the papers about, New Jersey having very ambitious goals and other states having very, very ambitious goals. Pennsylvania has not really moved the bar significantly for renewable. So absent action by state and federal government, it's really in your hands to move the marketplace. And by purchasing, you can move the marketplace. So do you want cost competitive renewable? And we'll talk about that. That's available. If you switch, PECO remains your distributor. It still sends you the bill. It still responds if there's a power outage. All the suppliers are vetted by the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, the PUC, and the choice is yours, the details of the plan. So it's easy. I will say it has pitfalls. Why don't more people choose renewable power? Well, in part, it's because of the difficulty of the open market and the lack of some restrictions in terms of what the offerers can do. And so there are some bad feelings that have come out for people that have been on the open market buying electricity. So how do you avoid that? That's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. Well, when you shop, the first thing you want to do is you want to pull out your electricity bill, and further down, you're going to find information about your electric. Okay, so PECO will always remain your electric delivery company. So they manage the wires, they manage reliability, they respond in the event of outages. So in this example, you see that the electric supply is provided by someone else. And this happens to be an old bill of mine. And so I had Clearview Electric, which is supplying 100% wind power, national wind power, and we'll talk about what that means. And that price is actually below the PECO price. And so if you are shopping based on price, you can get cost below PECO's price to compare, okay? By far, the easiest way to purchase electricity, renewable electricity in southeastern Pennsylvania is makebenproud.com. So this is courtesy of a gentleman from Abington who basically runs the site. It's an example of what you can accomplish, and an individual can accomplish in promoting things that people can do to combat climate change. And he does all the research and he posts all the information, and it's very, very simple. So this is to the right, this is what the entry page looks like after you click on PECO. And if you're interested in the rates, I think even if you're not buying based solely on rates, you still want to see maybe sort it from lowest to highest. There are some other buttons. So some people say, well, I don't care as long as it's renewable. Some people may want Pennsylvania regional. We'll talk about green e-audited. I want a contract duration of longer than 1 year. So those are the buttons that are available to you. Now, one of the things that you should know about this site, which is why we like it so much, is they eliminate all variable rate plans. So you saw what happened in Texas recently. Anyone with a variable rate plan, their electric bills skyrocketed. So we do not recommend a variable rate plan, even though when you happen to get into it, it seems like it's attractive. So what you really want is a term contract, and you could select the term of your contract. So the other thing that you'll see on the website is simple information about fees. And so this is an example. As you go down the web page, you'll see a listing. And now this is a snapshot in time. This is actually an old snapshot, and I'm continuing to use this because I wanted to convey the message that the market changes week to week, month to month, okay, and it's there are seasonal effects and so forth. So, but the website keeps up with it, and it will sort it in the order of price. So you have many at this time. There were many that were below PECO's price versus today. If you went on it, I think there are only 2 that are below PECO's price. And what you'll notice is nationwide, right? 100% renewables, mainly wind nationwide. Those are usually less expensive. And then as you go down the list, well, you see something called REX, which we'll talk about in a moment. As you go down the list, you'll see wind with some solar in Pennsylvania. So solar is generally a higher priced power that you're buying on the open market. And then as you continue to go down to higher prices, You see 100% regional wind, meaning mainly Pennsylvania. And so you'll see things like cancellation fees and so forth. As you continue to go down the list, you'll see options for 100% in-state, higher solar, and so forth. And the prices go pretty high, but the interesting thing is there are also there's no lack of people that offer high costs even for national wind. So this is where, the open market tends to throw people for a curve. So what's not included are anything that's not a fixed rate. And I will say, there's another way to buy, which is the more well-known way to buy, and that's papowerswitch.com. This website is much more difficult to use. It's got the variable rate plans. It's got other such problems with its use that I think more difficult to use. I think you probably want to stay away from it. I was going to quick switch to, let's see. So this is a live shot of Make Ben Proud. So it's as simple as pulling out your electric bill. You will need it. Okay, I'm going to sort by rates low to high. Now, as I scroll down, I'm seeing, as I said, only two plans that are below PECO's price. And here's one thing you want to be aware of. A base fee or a monthly fee means that you're really not paying this $569. So if you don't see the fees, see, this plan is fixed through December, okay? And it's 100% Green E certified, which is a certification program. You'll see such things, I'll explain RECs in a minute. As you go down the list, again, watch for the monthly fees. You'll see some interesting things. Now, one of the things you have to ask is, well, what's your priority? Well, maybe your priorities, you want to set it and forget it. Well, there are some plans that are available for a fixed 3-year term so that it's at a slightly higher rate, but you can set it and forget it. Put this rate at perspective. PECO's rates have been coming down mostly due to the lower price of natural gas. And unfortunately, we're not accounting in the price of this natural gas produced electricity, the cost of climate change, which we're all bearing as part of our taxes. But so you can, if that's your priority, I don't want to be bothered. There are some long-term plans. Some people say, well, I like the Energy Co-op. It's a local organization that's selling, and I like the fact that it's a co-op. You're going to see somewhat higher rates. Sometimes you'll see, I'm not noticing like 100% solar. From time to time, those are available and those tend to be somewhat higher price. Oh, here we go, sorry. 100% solar PA. So the price is going to be probably about, well, it looks like about twice that of the low end. But if your priority is, I want to support Pennsylvania solar, well, that's something that you could do. Of course, the best way to support Pennsylvania solar is to install solar on your house. Okay, so let's see. The other thing I did want to show you is PA Power Switch. Okay, so this is a little bit more complicated. 190, you just, whoops. 19083, and that's my zip code and regular residential service, a gazillion plans, and a little bit harder to deal with. Well, let's say I want to look at fixed rate plans, and then it gives you the ability to sort you could sort by price. Whoops, I don't know what's going on there. anyway, you could see that it's a little bit more complicated and it's a little bit harder to choose renewable energy, but you can do it. And then you could organize it. You can set term lengths and you can sort by price. Okay. So, and it gives you the PICO price to compare as well. So hopefully that answers, whoops, wrong one. That answers the how-to question. And the one thing I think we would advise you to avoid is don't respond to phone solicitations. Do your research, do your own shopping. It could go very, very quickly. Once you, by the way, I didn't demonstrate it, but on Make Ben Proud, there you click on a plan that you like, and it will take you to the company's website, and it's a very simple enrollment process. So avoid the monthly fees, avoid the variable pricing. Very, very important. One simple piece of advice: if you don't want your price to rise after your contract period is over, put it on your calendar. When do you put it on the calendar? About 4 to 6 weeks ahead of the expiration of your contract, because you need to review what they're going to do with regard to price, and you need to decide if you're going to shop again well in advance of the end of the contract period. So just put it on an Outlook calendar or any other calendar that you keep, and make sure that you take a look at the new plan information. One of the things that you may find with the new plan is, oh, it's a similar rate, but maybe they're not proposing a fixed term contract anymore. Maybe it's month to month. So you really have to be careful. Almost every supplier will price wise. Sometimes if you call the supplier, they will give you information about a better plan than they've made as an offer. So very, very simple. Be a smart buyer. Check the terms that they send you. If you don't like a price rise, shop again. If you have a good reason for sticking with a provider for other reasons other than cost, go for it. If you want a long-term contract, go for that as well. But really, very simply, in 20 minutes once a year, if you get it on your calendar, you should be able to get it right. So if you need more help, haveswitch@gmail.com. Would be happy to walk you through it. If you buy renewable power and you want this lovely lawn sign that you're seeing to communicate to your neighbors, we'll send an email to HaveSwitch and we'll be happy to send you one as well. So I'm not sure if there's any questions. Joy?
We have not received any in the chat. Does anybody have any questions for Peter?
Okay, if not, I'm going to move on to, you saw the term REC, renewable energy credit. What is it? So people who generate renewable energy, including a homeowner that has solar, can basically sell that renewable energy by selling a renewable energy credit. So some of these power providers are buying the credits and then offering you quote unquote renewable power. Legally, technically, whoever is buying that renewable energy credit is the one who's using renewable power. So just to explain that, Greenie is a audit certification program that gives you a higher level assurance than the PJM tracking. And let's see, so that was all I had. Joy, any more questions? Okay, I will say one thing to anyone who's thought about doing this and hasn't done it. There are only maybe 5% of Pennsylvanians who buy renewable power on the open market. And so my message is for the 75% of Pennsylvanians who think we should do something about climate change that are not among the 5% that are buying renewable power, and the lower numbers that are generating it themselves on their home, you want to do this, and it's really not that hard.
Thank you very much, Peter. We will move on to our next talk, which is from Jason Baxter. Jason is a chemical engineering professor at Drexel who has solar on his home and whose research focuses on photovoltaics or solar cells. Jason.
Okay, thanks, Joy. Yeah, so as Joy said, I'm a professor at Drexel, and my research group does research on solar energy conversion, and I teach a course there on how solar cells work. But probably most relevant for this talk is that we did put solar panels on our own house in 2012. So I want to talk a little bit about what you can think about of whether putting solar panels on your own house or business makes sense for you. And at the end, I'll talk about a program called Solarize Delco, which can potentially make the process even easier and cheaper. So most of you probably know the basics of solar already. So solar panels are typically made from silicon, which is the same stuff that is in our computer chips. Okay, the silicon absorbs the light and converts that energy into electricity. We put the solar panels on the top of a house or out in a field. Okay, so for a home solar installation, you've got solar panels on your home. They produce DC, direct current electricity. You need some kind of power conditioning electronics so that it makes that electricity look the same as the electricity that you get from the grid in terms of voltage and frequency. And then that electricity can be fed into your house. Okay, so you have first crack at the electricity that your solar panels are producing. There will be times when you're actually producing more electricity than what your house needs. And in those cases, the extra electricity gets fed out to the grid. There will be other times, like night, when your solar panels are not producing as much as you need. And in those cases, you will take electricity from the grid into your house. So essentially, you then have meters that keep track of the amount of electricity that you are taking in and the amount of electricity that you're pushing out to the grid. So one of the ways that you make your money back after installing solar panels is the fact that you don't need to pay for the electricity. You don't need to pay for as much electricity from the grid because you're producing your own. And the way that PECO keeps track of this is through a procedure called net metering, where you basically, at the end of the month, you look at how much electricity did you take from the grid, how much electricity did you give to the grid, you subtract these numbers, and that's what you owe. For our house in particular, we produce a little over 100% of our electricity needs for the year. So we have essentially zero electricity bill minus the $10 a month that we pay for PECO to manage the grid. So there's a bunch of benefits of solar. Okay, first of all, you can use it to fight global warming. So as Peter said in the previous talk, if we get electricity from the standard grid from PECO, it is a mixture of electricity that's been generated from gas, coal, and nuclear, with about 0.5% coming from solar. So Project Drawdown is a really excellent resource. You can go to drawdown.org, where they look at the top solutions for trying to reverse global warming. And they identified rooftop solar as one of the top 10 solutions. So it's a really important thing that we can try to implement more and more. It also is potentially a good return on the investment. So you do put money down typically to install these solar panels, and then you eventually make your money back. And there's two ways that you can do that. One is you essentially have prepaid your electricity if you choose to buy your solar panels outright, but then you don't have to pay for that electricity usage from your utility service. The other way that you can make some money back is from the solar renewable energy credits, or SRECs, which are related to what Peter had just talked about. So for every 1,000 kilowatt hours that your system produces, you can sell an SREC on the open market. These are currently about $20. So for our system, we might make something like $800 per year of saved energy cost because we're producing our own electricity. And we might make $160 a year on these SRECs. Okay, so we're kind of transitioning now from the first three talks on food, energy efficiency at home, and buying renewable. These are really easy things that everybody can start making an impact in immediately, to now with solar and electric vehicles for the last talks, some things that are maybe a little bit more, take a little bit more commitment. So energy efficiency is a great return on investment, as I said earlier. Some other benefits of solar is that there is no maintenance. So we put these on our house in 2012. We've not had to do a thing with them since that time. And they can increase your home value because when you're going to sell your home, you can advertise that you have essentially zero electricity bill. Right, so you might be interested in whether or not your own home or business would be suitable for rooftop solar. There's a couple of easy boxes to check to see if that's true. So first, you want to look at the orientation and shading of your roof. So you would like it to be unshaded, of course, and ideally facing south. It doesn't have to be due south. The map here at the bottom shows our house with the pin in it. So our roof basically faces southeast, and that's totally fine. Flat roofs also work in this area. Second question would be, how old is the roof? So you don't want to put solar panels on an old roof, because then if you have to replace the roof, you have to take off the panels, replace the roof, and put the panels back, and it's a hassle. So it's much better to replace the roof first and then install the solar panels, because the solar panels are expected to last probably at least 30 years. Okay, so you don't want to be needing to replace the roof in the meantime. A good way to check the sunniness of your roof, other than just walking across the street and looking at your roof yourself, is to go to Google Project Sunroof. So it will show a heat map, or actually a light map, of favorable settings. So this is my street, here's our house, and you can see the bright yellow color indicates that this is a very favorable spot for putting solar panels. And the same would be true for a bunch of my neighbors, and hopefully someday they will too. So you might be thinking, well, our house has a big tree, or because of the way that there's a whole bunch of angles on the roof, or it's not south facing, it's not a good candidate. That's okay. Peter just gave a great talk on how you can go into buying renewable electricity instead. So you can still reduce your carbon footprint in that way. So you can use Make Ben Proud as a good resource. So if at this point things seem promising, you're still interested, of course, you're interested in the financials as well. So how much does it cost? Well, that depends on the size of your system, and how big you make your system essentially depends on two factors. One is, how much electricity do you use, right? So the bigger your system is, the more area that it covers, the more electricity it can produce. The average home in Pennsylvania uses about 10,000 kilowatt hours per year. We use about 8,000 kilowatt hours in our house. You also want to see, what is your suitable roof area? So we were fortunate that we could cover most of our front roof with solar panels, but you might have angles or other reasons why you can't do that. Okay, so between these things, that will indicate what can your system area be. That determines its power rating. So ours is about 6.4 kilowatts, and that determines how many kilowatt hours per year it can produce. As I said, ours makes about 8,000 kilowatt hours in a year. So for residential solar, the cost is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $3 a watt, typically. Okay, so that would put you in the neighborhood of $15,000 or $20,000 for the system cost. There are currently tax incentives. So there is a federal income tax credit for 26% of the system cost. So that already knocks it down to something in the neighborhood of $10,000 or $15,000. Okay, I mentioned earlier, you make that money back by savings in not having to buy electricity from your utility company, and also in selling SRECs. So after 25 years, which is the warranted life of the solar system in most cases, you would have expected to make, somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000. Okay, numbers are a bit different for commercial because of ways that you can manage depreciation and things like that. Now you might be thinking $10,000 or $15,000 is too much money to put up front, but you don't always have to do it that way. There's a bunch of different options for loans, and these might result in less savings, but also lower upfront costs. Things are a little bit trickier for nonprofits, but still possible. So there's various different financing options available. So for example, through the Clean Energy Co-op of Southeastern PA or the PA Solar Center, they can give you more information. Our host, Joy, has done lots of work of figuring out what are some financial ways that nonprofits can install solar. I mentioned this tax credit for 26% of the system cost. This comes right up front. This is going to be around just for a couple more years. It's phasing out to 22% by 2023 and then down to 0% by 2024. Fortunately, the price of solar has come down dramatically in the last few years, and it's going to keep on doing that for a little bit longer. So there's a lot of places where solar is already cost competitive with other electricity sources. Okay, I mentioned you don't have to pay up front. If you pay everything up front and go in the hole by $15,000 or so, you start then immediately making back your money. Whoops. And that results in the biggest return on investment, but also the biggest upfront cash layout. Other options are different kinds of loans where you have less upfront payment, but you ultimately make a bit less money back in the end. So it's up to you. It's depending on what is your financial situation. All right, so if things are looking good, now what are the next steps to actually make this happen? First, you need to get some quotes. So you could contact your local installer, and there are many options out there. A way to get a lot of quotes in a hurry is to go to EnergySage.com. So EnergySage.com is put together by the US Department of Energy. They've got a lot of great information about solar, so you can kind of take your time and go back and read more. If you put your information in, it is then accessible to lots of companies that will contact you. Another option is Tesla solar panels. So they don't come up in the EnergySage quotes, but they frequently have good prices, a bit more cookie cutter type of systems, so less customization. And then an option that I'll talk about at the end today is Solarized Delco that you can use to save money through group buying. You need to decide how you want to finance this. The installers can help you think about it. Solarized Delco can help you think about the financing options. The Clean Energy Credit Union offers competitive loans. And of course, there's other resources as well. And then you just go ahead and sign the agreement, and hopefully within a month or two, you can get your panels installed. So here's just a couple of pictures from our installation. So we, at that time, were before Solarized Delco, we looked at local installers, and we went with MT Rule Electrical, who is a small business in Norristown. We were really happy with the work that they did. For us, it took these two guys about 2.5 days to do the installation. First day, they installed all the racking. Okay, so this is racking. They sink it directly into the rafters, so it's very secure. They do all the flashing to make sure that it's watertight. They can start putting down some of these electronics that go on the back of the panels. Second day, they hauled the panels up onto the roof, laid them all out, made sure everything was well connected. Third day, there were some odds and ends of tying into our electrical panel in the basement and installing the right kinds of meters on the back of the house. Okay, so we covered our full front roof in solar panels. There's 26 panels, and it provides a little over 100% of our current electricity use. We have Solar Edge for our inverter, which has a nice monitoring system that goes with it. It can tell you what all the panels are doing at any given moment. You can track the system power output as a function of minutes or days. So here you can see there's a partly cloudy day, a sunny day, it's producing nothing at night. Here's some scattered clouds. And you can look at it on a monthly basis across the years. So as you would expect, it's producing more spring, summer, early fall, and then less in the winter. So I'm going to take the last couple minutes to talk about Solarized Delco. This is an organization formed by volunteers who want to make it easier for you to try to install solar on your home. So these are people who have done it themselves or have some experience in the industry, and they can help you navigate. They can remove barriers in a couple of ways. One is by helping to get you information about whether you are a good candidate for solar. Another is they have gone through the steps of identifying an installer. Okay, so one of the scariest things I think for new people to getting into this is how do you pick an installer? Well, they have done the vetting process and have found someone who is reliable and low cost. Okay, so that is making things a lot easier just sometimes to have only one very reliable choice instead of too many choices that have a lot of uncertainty. You also have the benefit of saving money. So because this is an arrangement with an installer, Solarize Delco has negotiated a price, which is typically 8 or 10% below the market price, with additional possibilities for further savings. So the more people install, the more your savings are per size of your system, or additional bonuses if you're one of the first people to sign contracts. So there are several different ways that this can be less expensive and easier compared to going it on your own. So Solarize will help with your initial roof assessment, help to predict how many kilowatt hours per year your system might produce, and can connect you with the installer. If things are looking good, then the installer can give you an official roof evaluation and a cost proposal. You can then go through, sign the contracts. The installer typically takes care of all the paperwork, the permitting, dealing with the interconnect with PECO. So it's pretty seamless on the part of the homeowner, and you end up getting electricity from the sun, which is a pretty great way to do it. So if you're interested, there's several different emails. So if you're from Delaware County, you would use solarizedelco@gmail.com. There's a separate site for Solarize Philly, or if you're not in either of those two counties, Solarize Southeastern Pennsylvania. All it really takes to get started is to tell them who you are, give them your name, email, and phone number, that you want solar, and you do need to confirm that you own the property before you get going. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and allow time for any questions. We also have Melissa Romano, who is one of the leaders of the Solarize Delco, and she can help answer questions on that front as well.
Thank you, Jason. Do we have any questions for Jason or Melissa for as far as Solarize Delco? You can either put them in the chat or you can go ahead and unmute and ask them.
There's one question here. If you're not buying up front, what is your other option? Well, I mean, you can buy up front and use loans so that you don't need to pay all of the money up front. You can kind of pay back the loan in order to pay for the system. Okay, that works like a mini mortgage or something like that, essentially. There are other options for leasing or for power purchase agreements. I think those are not so popular anymore since the price of solar has come down quite a bit. Most people just go with the loan option if they don't want to do the cash up front. Melissa, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes, I would like to add that the solar loans, we do have them available through the contractor. So if you were to get your proposal through the contractor, they have a loan company they work with, and they have a bunch of different options, 5-year, 12-year, 20-year, different interest rates, different things like that. So they can help with the financing as well. Or you can look into, the way I got mine was through my home loan. So I got a loan through my homeowners and paid for it that way. And if you do that, if you acquire through like a credit union or your bank or homeowners, that way you get the money. You're considered a cash person as far as the contractor is concerned, because you'll pay with a check because you already got your money elsewhere. So you end up getting a better rate that way. It's a little bit cheaper. You don't have to worry about all the fees involved with their loans. I also wanted to mention Solarize Delco will have a brand new website coming out in a week or two, and it will be solarizedelco.org if you guys want to look into that. And we're also on Facebook, facebook.com/solarizedelco.
Yeah, I would mention, this is Peter, that the third option that is out there is called a power purchase agreement. And so that's available. It's sort of no cash outlay, and the company that offers it is actually the owner of the system. We don't encourage it, even though a lot of people like it, because it actually has the worst payback of the three options.
I did want to mention there are also some places that will give you a short-term loan. So I mentioned there's a 26% federal income tax credit. You do have to wait to get that until you get your next tax rebate. So if you're installing now, you wouldn't pay taxes until next year. So you might not get that rebate check back until next April. So if you need that money right off the bat, there are some short-term options for loans to make sure you don't have to float that extra 26%. Other questions?
Well,
Okay.
well, I did want to mention if anyone is interested in Solarized Delco, just send an email. But the folks who are assessing can answer any of those questions in greater detail in terms of, well, what about a loan? What about purchase? What about a power purchase agreement? So they'll walk you through that whole process.
Great, thank you. And I will plug, I am part of a presentation this next Tuesday evening, Getting Started with Solar in Pennsylvania, which is geared for residents, business owners, and nonprofits. I will put that information in the chat. If you have someone that you think might be interested in that, feel free to invite them. Next up, we have Noel Smith, who'll be giving a presentation on driving electric cars. Noel is a member of the EAC and heads up the Delaware County chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby, and he's an owner of electric cars and solar panels. Oh.
Thank you very much. And I think I should put on my video as well. So thanks everyone for your interest today. Yeah, I'm a longtime owner of an electric car. In fact, my wife and I both drive electric now and power it with our solar panels, which is really exciting as well. And oops. So yeah, we saw that. So just a little bit of history on cars. If you were electric cars were actually came out before gasoline cars, and that's just kind of a little bit of a interesting tidbit for folks to realize. They think electric cars are rather new, and the gasoline vehicle is kind of the established, and it is. When electric cars first came out, they were somewhat limited in their range, and but they were easy to drive, easy to start. You would just go in and push a button just like you do today. And then in 1910, the Model T came out and solved a lot of the issues, the range issues. It was harder to start, and it was difficult to change gears, and you had to put this toxic, flammable chemical into it, but it did in fact take off, and electric cars kind of sat around for a while until very recently. All right, so there's a big environmental motivation to why you would want to purchase an electric vehicle, and the transportation sector in the United States, or really globally, is about 28% of the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted on an annual basis, and of that 28% transportation, light duty vehicles, the cars and trucks that we drive on a daily basis, accounts for 61% of that. So you can see by making the choice to go to a low emitting vehicle like an electric vehicle, you can really be part of the solution for climate change and really just air pollution in general. So let me give you a little bit of a background on the electric vehicle landscape right now. What I'm going to talk about first is hybrid electric vehicles. There's two types. There's a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle and an extended range electric vehicle. And you can see a simplistic picture of each of the drivetrains there. But one of the things that jumps out is there's two drivetrains on each of them. But really, on the left one, that's the plug-in hybrid, kind of like a Prius Prime, or the plug-in Prius. There'll be a drivetrain for the electric component, and there'll be a drivetrain for the gasoline. So it runs a combustion engine, just like cars do. So really, it has both. So you've also then just kind of increased the number of failure points in the vehicle and maintenance points and what have you. The one on the right is what's called an extended range. This one really just does have one drivetrain, which is electric. It uses gasoline to produce more electricity that charges the battery that allows you to go. There's some advantages to this. It's a good transition car. It does allow you for long range. You can go to a gas station and refill it, or you can plug it in at a plug-in station. So you kind of have both of those options. For many drivers, you know, it's a great option to provide 100% of your commute on electric, which is really a big deal. And then you still then have the, you know, the peace of mind of knowing that you've got gasoline and you can always just fill that at a gas station. Disadvantages, it is more complex, as I noticed, and it still burns gasoline. So all electric vehicles, you can see here, the drivetrain is a little bit simpler. It only has the one. It has a battery and a motor. You know, there's lots of options on that now. The Bolt is an option. Tesla, Nissan Leaf, these are examples of what that might look like. As far as performance, we're going to talk more about this. It's fine for almost all of your commutes without having to worry about plugging in. You do have to plan for longer trips, meaning city to city trips. When I say longer trips, and in the cold weather, this is a really important point. The range does decrease in cold weather, and it's just due to the battery technology. And so pros and cons of an electric versus non. Some pros: you've great accelerations, very quiet, very low operating costs in comparison to a gasoline vehicle. There is actually people ask me how long does it take to charge, and my answer is really it takes no time at all, because I plug it in when I'm at home and I'm doing something else at home, and I really don't have to think about it. I don't go to gas stations, and that's time fueling. I spend no time fueling. I just plug it in and go about my day. There are some subsidies that still exist. Depends on which one you buy. And of course, the environmental benefits. There's the cons. I just updated the cons. So this slide deck has been around a while. So I put something in parentheses for each. Higher initial costs. Well, maybe not. So we have to look at which ones. And we're going to talk about cost in a minute. But the cost is quickly catching up, meaning the initial cost may actually be quite the same as a comparable gasoline car. Longer fuel time on trips, but you know it's getting better. The infrastructure is getting built out. The charging infrastructure pretty rapidly. The model selection used to be limited. It's rapidly expanding. There's been some announcements recently about certain manufacturers that are moving 100% of their fleet to electric vehicles. GM, Volkswagen, I believe Mercedes and BMW and some others have announced really the roadmap of moving 100% electric. So you'll see there's a lot more options out today and more coming. And then, you know, range limitation for intercity travel, and that's kind of going away too. And I'm going to show a diagram of what that looks like. And so some common electric vehicle myths that are out there that people talk about. One is that plug-in electric vehicles can only support short trips, not daily commutes. But in fact, pretty much all the EVs that are for sale today have well over a 200-mile range when you fully plug it in. Some are over 300. The average commute or daily drive is less than 40 miles a day. So you can see that kind of myth is busted. On the bottom left, electric vehicles will make up your energy bill go way up. In fact, the truth is it makes your energy bill go down because you have to include gasoline as part of your energy bill. It's not just your electricity bill. Yes, your electricity bill at home will go up, but you won't buy gasoline anymore. And so the net is you pay less for energy using an electric vehicle. They're way more efficient than a gasoline vehicle. Another myth is that plug-in vehicles aren't clean. They run off of dirty power plants. You can buy clean energy. And in fact, our energy mix in the southeastern Pennsylvania is it's got a nice mix of nuclear power in there, and there's of course a lot of natural gas, a tiny bit of coal, but it's still cleaner than burning gasoline. Even if you don't buy have solar panels at home or buy clean energy, it is still cleaner than burning gasoline directly. The last myth on this slide: electric vehicles are far more expensive than the average car. And they're very comparable right now. In fact, they're not a lot. There's still incentives that are out there, and the price of the battery has dropped substantially in the last 7 or 8 years, so that they're becoming quite a bit more efficient or affordable today. Just a highlight of the EV performance. It really is a pleasure to drive. You get instant torque, and unless you've driven one and experienced that, it's hard to go back. Once you experience that, I'm saying it's hard to go back to gasoline vehicles, that when you push the acceleration pedal, there's this delay before the vehicle goes in. In an electric car, you just don't get that. It's got very quick acceleration. There are no gears, so there's none of that gear changing. The ride is extraordinarily smooth and quiet. Equal weight distribution is kind of a neat thing too. I do have a vehicle that has the battery pack on the bottom, and it's a 100%. The distribution of the weight to every tire is the same, which makes for a very stable ride on curvy roads, which is kind of nice. And it also comes with a low center of gravity. Electronic controls. I call my car kind of an iPad on wheels, and it really is. And it's got this thing called regenerative braking, which is just another way of turning I guess you're braking the friction of slowing down a car to a stop. It takes that energy and puts it back into the battery, which makes it even more efficient and makes your batteries your brakes last a lot longer. Yeah, they're generally heavier. So that's the performance. This is just to tell you what to look for. As you do look for, if you're looking for a new vehicle, if you want to see how to compare the fuel costs for an electric vehicle versus a gasoline vehicle, on the EPA sticker on the vehicle, which you'll see on every vehicle, you'll see the annual fuel cost. You can see on this example, the annual fuel cost for the electric vehicle on the left is $500 a year, and the comparable gasoline car on the right is $2,150 a year. So that's a nice, but make sure that you compare apples to apples when you're looking at that, and this is a good way to do that. So maintenance. I'm going to compare a Leaf and a Camry maintenance, and just talk about what to expect from a maintenance perspective. Again, EVs are all a little bit different. Some other ones may have even less maintenance than the Leaf, but yep, they're both going to need tires, oil change. The Leaf will never need an oil change. You'll need to get that with your Camry. The transmission fluid, the Leaf doesn't have that either, so you won't ever have to do that. There is a coolant every 30,000 miles for the Camry, but every 125, they ask that you change the coolant for the Leaf. There are no spark plugs in a Leaf, but you need to replace those in a Camry. The brakes I put for the Leaf half as much, but it may be less than that. I can tell you I have 110,000 miles on my electric car, and I am still on the original set of brake pads that came with it new. The car was bought in 2015, and the last inspection, they said I'm about halfway through. So I think I'm expecting close to 200,000 miles on my brake pads, because I use regenerative braking to slow the vehicle down. I've just kind of changed the way I drive. There's no timing belt in an electric car. There is in a gasoline, and the rest are just kind of there because, yeah, you still need to change the washer fluid, the wiper blades, and the cabin filters, just like any other vehicle. So lots of advantages of less maintenance. In fact, the newer Teslas, my wife has a newer Model 3. They tell her there is no scheduled maintenance. When something looks like it's going to fail or needs to get looked at, the car will tell you when to get it maintenance. An example of that is there is still a 12-volt battery in the vehicles. My car told me the other day, hey, it's time to get your 12-volt battery looked at. It doesn't have much life left. And so I was able to replace it before it failed, which is kind of cool. Okay, charging. There's 3 types of charging, level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 is your standard home outlet. You have that in your house today. So everyone is ready to do level 1 charging at home today. Level 2 is kind of the same as an electric stove. So you would have to run an outlet that basically is a 40 or 50 amp circuit. And then you can charge your vehicle much quicker. At my car skiing, I don't know, about 30 to 35 miles an hour when it's plugged into our home level 2. So if we drive 50 miles a day, it might take 2 hours to replace that on the level 2. DC fast charge is what you'll see. You'll never do that at home. That's extremely high or high voltage, very fast charging that you'll see on highway rest stops and what have you. And they vary as far as their range effect. Some of the networks go up to several hundred miles added per hour. Very, very, very fast charging. Where do people charge? When you have an electric car, and you will someday, you're going to primarily plug it in at home. That's where I do 95+% of my charging is at home, because that's where my car spends most of the time sitting. Then if you kind of look up this pyramid, you might do it at work. I used to have a job down in Delaware that had a plug. I plugged in at work every day. It was kind of a nice perk. I didn't have to plug in at home anymore. Public areas or city to city travel are kind of at the top of that. The level 2s and 3s. So primarily you're gonna charge at home. It's the most convenient. So the level 1 charger, like I said, you have today. The level 2, it'll cost you between $500 and $2,000 depending on what appliance and who your contractor is. So if you do it yourself and what have you, I was able to run my own to my house, so it really cost me the cost of the wire. So that's charging. This is a map from a little while ago, but it shows the high power stations are in orange. That's the DC chargers, the fast chargers. The public stations are the green. That's a level 2. So you can see a level 2 and level 3 chargers. And that is the I-95 corridor, which, it's hard to get. Yeah, there's plenty of charging if you're going up and down 95. So, and then in really most urban centers, there's lots of charging options now that the infrastructure is really advanced. If you're going to compare 5-year cost, you can do that here. And I just wanted to make a point that in the current Kelley Blue Book shows that the Nissan Leaf has a 5-year cost of about $35,000 compared to a Honda Accord. That's a pretty comparable comparison. The Honda Accord is $38,000. So it's actually, the Leaf is more affordable right out of the box than a comparable gasoline car. The Prius is a little bit higher at 40, and then you get some of the other options. If you wanted to get the Maxima, it's even more. So you can see there's some options. Federal tax credits and rebates exist today. Depends on the model. There is limitations for each of them from the government in terms of, which ones still have credit left after they sell 200,000. It starts to ramp down to zero after that. PA, I also did get a rebate on mine. I just did look at the website. It's not active, but they are going to make it active very shortly. I guess the funding's in place and it should be funded by, they said spring of 2021, there will be a PA rebate as well. I'm not sure what that will be yet. So that's the presentation I have. I'll pause it there and see if we have any questions from folks on what was presented. I talked pretty fast and we'll answer everyone's questions now.
Thank you, Noel. We do have a question in from Lucia. Do you get a discount at inspection for your electric car?
Well, I would say discount. You don't have to do emissions. And so the cost of the emissions inspection goes away. You don't have to do it. So I guess the answer would be yes. You do have to get an inspection sticker like anyone else for the safety features of the vehicle, but you do not have to get the emissions, which is I think around $40 or $50 less for inspection.
And I have a question about the different charging stations that you showed different ports.
Yep.
So does your car, depending on what kind of car you have, mean what kind of port? And can you go between different types of ports?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a standard level 2 and level 3 ports that are out there. So there's a J1772, it's a very technical term, but that's the level 2 standard that all vehicles purchased in the United States will either have with the car or will be an option to buy with the car to for my car, I have an adapter that I put into my car that connects to the J1772. So I can plug in at any standard level 2 charger. I can plug into. And then the level 3s also has a standard that your vehicle will either have when you buy it, or you will buy an adapter if you want to, that adapts to it. So, yep. So there's industry standards that all the vehicles will have either out of the box or an adapter you can purchase with. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and elaborate a little bit about charging. So I have a Chevy Bolt, and if you don't drive more than 50, 100 miles a day, you really could charge out of a 110 volt outlet, which is a level 1.
Right.
And level 2 goes much faster than that. level 3 or DC fast charging for some cars is an option. So if you are interested in taking your electric car on the road, for Tesla owners like Noel, you don't have to worry because they're all equipped for fast charging. But I think it was a $750 option on my Chevy Bolt, which I felt was an essential for me, planning to take it on the road. We've driven up to Maine, and I've driven up on business trips out to Ohio and Western Pennsylvania. So you really need the fast charge, DC fast charge for option for that.
My family recently went camping, and at the campground, they had an electric car charging station.
Awesome. A state campground?
State park, yeah.
Yeah, they are they're putting them in all the state parks. I also heard something very interesting, asking about rebates. So the state rebate program is actually pretty good for electric vehicles. So you can get $750 on a used car, or a state rebate. So they're really trying to make it a little bit more affordable for folks who are income limited. And actually, I believe in May, they're going to announce an even better program, which is going to provide higher rebates based on income. So for those who, can't look at a $35,000, $30,000 sticker price, there's a lot of options. And some of these used electric vehicles are actually very low cost now. I know someone who just recently bought a Chevy Bolt used, so very affordable. I think, it's kind of model specific. So Teslas seem to hold their value. They've got that, that aura. But the Chevys can be had used at a very reasonable price.
Great, thank you, Peter. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank you all for coming to the series today. And these will be made available on our YouTube channel, which you can search under Haverford EAC if you'd like to share them with others. And also a copy of the recording will be emailed to you. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.